Welcome to the March edition of the Convo by Design Icon Registry. You know, I consider myself extremely fortunate, seriously, to have had some of the most incredible conversations with the most amazing people. And it's not easy selecting icons. Because the criteria has always been very specific. It's not about the $1 million projects. It's not about how many followers one has on social media. It's not about headlines or articles or magazine lists. It's never been about that. It's always been about truly unique, authentic people delivering authentic, incredible design, giving back to the community that gave so much to them, and a willingness to be open and vulnerable to tell their stories. And I have one such amazing and incredible individual today to install in the Convo by Design Icon Registry presented by Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home. Bold vision, grounded leadership, and the relentless pursuit of purpose in this deeply personal and strategic journey. Damen Jenkins has discipline, resilience, and intentional leadership behind his rise. And he told the story of knocking on 779 doors to build a global design brand rooted in humility, creativity, and purpose. He tells this story. He told it to me, and you got to hear it, and we're going to air that conversation again. Corey is widely recognized for his exuberant interiors, his fearless color, rich materiality, and a joyful sense of aspiration. But behind the visual confidence is a disciplined leader, strategic thinker, and resilient entrepreneur who built his career through persistence, focus, and unwavering belief in his purpose. Purpose. We don't talk about that enough. It's amazing. And some of the concepts that you're gonna glean from this conversation is this purpose-driven career transformation, the toy box philosophy, editing as a creative with business discipline, leadership through humility, and intentional hiring. So important. Surrounding yourself with not just talented people, but the right talented people. Protecting creative vision through licensing and IP strategy. So important. Designers as emotional and strategic partners. You heard Corey say a couple of things, rather, I heard Corey say a couple of things that you are going to hear, and I want to put them out there because they're so important. Success requires focus. You have to put the big priorities in first. So important. This one, I love. Rejection isn't failure. It's part of the journey. How about this? Humility keeps you grounded and makes you a better leader. We don't hear things like that enough. How about this? Design isn't just about beauty. It's about transformation. That is so incredibly true. Anyway, I am so thankful that Corey made the time to talk to me and talk to us. And he is our March 2026 Convo by Design Icon Registry inductee presented by Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home. And thank you to them for making this possible for me to do this. And you're going to hear everything from Corey right after this. If you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've heard me say this, that the most important word in the design industry is service. Product is important, price is important, selection is important, but stellar service is the premier idea that can make all the difference in the success of a project, any project. how design professionals like you demand great service and your favorite brands in one place with expert, knowledgeable, and non commission sales professionals. It's really important. It means that their only incentive is your satisfaction. Pacific Sales, Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, has just that with over 60 years of experience in Southern California. Pacific Sales is your destination for exploration, advice, and inspiration. Now, you have the Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home team to help you and offer their Pro Rewards program, which is a trade program unlike any you have experienced before. Earn 3% in Best Buy gift cards, e-gift cards, or 2.5% in rewards checks for every qualified and delivered sale. In addition to special trade pricing, exclusive offers, access to exclusive special events, and so much more than I could possibly tell you about here. And the cherry on top is access to exclusive builder trade incentives from top brands and the stellar service, again, from a company that has been serving the industry for over 60 years. Terms and conditions apply to the Pro Rewards program and builder trade incentives. So visit a Pacific Sales expert at a showroom today for full details and to learn how you can unlock additional savings and benefits. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with the best of the best. Visit Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home today and elevate your projects to new heights. So you and I met for the first time at KBIS. It's funny because we've spoken before. I think I think you and I spoke. You were doing Kips Bay, or you were doing a showcase house on the East Coast years ago
New
when we
York.
spoke.
Hmm.
And but KBIS was the first time you and I got a chance to meet in person. It was great. When it comes to events like that, when it comes to shows, how do you navigate? Because we're going to get into your schedule and
Hmm.
we're going to get into what you do, and it's kind of insane. How do
Um,
you how do you navigate the events and doing those kinds of, call it trade building,
mhm.
that you have to do as part of the gig? How do you navigate that as part of what you do as an overall designer?
That's a great question, and thank you so much for having me on with you. I'm looking forward to our chat today. I think that when you're prioritizing anything when it comes to business, it's really like the traditional toy box that we may have had to deal with as children. As a child, my mom and dad gave us a lot of toys, and they gave us a big wooden toy box that had a lid on it that, opened and closed, and our whole assignment, aside from other household chores, was to put our toys away. And we found that when you put the bigger toys in the box first, the big fire trucks and stuffed animals and dolls and all of that, and then you put the smaller toys in second, the Matchbox cars, the action figures, the marbles, and all the other little things. Those smaller things have a way of trickling down and finding a little niche, a little nook, a little cranny to kind of nestle into amongst the larger toys in the toy box. And then miraculously, the lid always closes. Whereas conversely, if you put all the small toys in first and then put the big toys on top of it, the lid almost never closes because they've taken up all the space that the larger toys really need to occupy to make room for the smaller things. So when I'm looking at engagements that take us outside of the design orbit from our day-to-day client work, like a show house, for example, or television, or streaming series, or whatever we're working on, even our coffee table book, right? These are important toys that are large in size, and I put them in the box as priorities. And then other things that are perhaps a smaller or moderate sized priority, they always find a way to kind of trickle in and toggle down, and they find a niche, a little crevice, a little nook to fall into. And it always works out as long as your priorities are set straight. Everything has a way of sorting itself out.
That's amazing. And you know what's interesting too, Corey? That's, to me, that's a metaphor for the edit. And the edit in your line of work is absolutely everything. And it's funny because you just kind of made that bridge between how it works for you on the business side and how the design actually works, because I imagine you approach the edit the same way.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Priorities are what governs excellence. It's the situation that is without priorities that can make things more difficult. So you have to have a schedule, you have to have a strategy, you have to have a way of, attacking what needs to be done and doing it in a way that makes sense. So,
It's so true. And I'm curious where, for you, where that comes from. So you got into the business in 96. You started your own firm in '08.
mhm.
Great time to start your own firm, by the way.
I would give it 1 star. Do not recommend. Yeah.
Don't do it during a financial crisis, financial disaster. Don't
A
do that.
great recession, yeah, a historic global meltdown economically. Yeah, definitely a 1 star. Do not recommend, but I did it.
But between 1996
hmm
and 2008, when you hung your own shingle,
Yeah.
what did you learn and what was the process and when did you know it was time?
Well, I think that in 96, when I first started pursuing interior design and studying architecture and drafting and the world of beauty that design and decoration presents as a career, I was very much under my father's influence in terms of what he deemed to be a real man with a real job. And he just did not see a man of color like myself being successful as a business person in interior design. And I think at the time, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, he had a reason to believe that there weren't um, a lot of big names. I can think of maybe one or possibly two that were successful. Um, but even now, the interior design community, Black Americans make up less than 1% of the industry nationally. So I can understand why he felt that it wasn't going to be a good business move for me to pursue a career in interior design, because he wanted me to be successful and to not be a starving artist, as he put it. But I did make the pivot. Part of it was out of necessity because I did take on a job working as a buyer, a purchasing agent for the big three in Metro Detroit for Ford, GM, and Chrysler. And I'm glad that I did that. That was under his encouragement to get a real job, And so I learned the value of managing, multi-million dollar budgets and price points and, those beautiful sage green and white horizontally striped spreadsheets, and making all these things work in terms of a larger corporation as a prototype buyer and as an indirect purchasing agent. But then when the great crash happened in 2007, I got laid off. So the real job did not protect me from the whims of people who were in power when it comes to government. And that's when I first realized I do not have the level of power or security in this real man's job that I was encouraged to believe. I'm just as dispensable as everyone else that has degrees and experience and tenure. None of that mattered during the Great Recession. So I decided to pivot into interior design where I would have a lot more control over my own destiny.
That's really interesting. And I'm curious the connection between you as business person, you as creative.
hmm
Oftentimes that there's those two ideas are in conflict
Right.
with each other.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, especially because you made the decision and you launched in what some might view, and I'm not kidding about this, but what some might view as the absolute most inopportune moment to do that.
Yeah.
In some cases, it is the most opportune because everyone else is flooding out. So for
Right.
you to go into a space that's being vacated by others is genius.
Well, yeah, thank you for saying that. I didn't
It
feel
may not
quite
have felt that way.
it definitely did not feel quite genius at the time, but looking back and with retrospect, in hindsight view, it worked out. Um, but that was a very aggressive time, and a very emotionally draining, and emotionally battering time for me. Remember, I had just lost my job of 10 years, a job that I expected to hold and to helm until I retired and, get my pension plan. That's what most Michiganders do. They work on the line or they work at some job for 30 years and they retire. So to have that rug pulled out from under me unexpectedly during the Great Meltdown in 2007 set me back on my heels and did a real number on my self-esteem. And then to embark on, knocking on 779 doors during the Great Recession to find my first client. Yes, there was a great opportunity and doors open at the 779th door, but it also meant 778 rejections, 778 door slammings in my face, 778 dogs being let out to chase me off the property, 778 people inviting me in their home and draining me of all my great ideas and concepts, and then to just ghost me when I would ask for a letter of agreement to be signed for the actual job. So it's 778 rejections on top of losing your job. So I look back on all of that, and I think that I'm grateful that everything worked out the way it did. But it certainly was, it came at a price, I think, emotionally and physically and mentally for me to kind of power through so much rejection back to back at that moment.
It's so interesting, and there's so much to unpack here. Something that you said really strikes a chord with me. Uh, that idea that people invite you into your home, into their home, and they just milk you for ideas
Mhm.
and then ghost you. This whole
Mhm.
idea of ghosting people is kind of a recent phenomena, but it's not new.
Horrible. Yeah.
And it's not new.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because we're in an industry now, but when you hear about dupes in particular,
Mhm.
and you hear about this creative theft and impinging on other people's IP rights of various sources, it really affects creatives way more than it does other people.
Mhm.
But what I find really interesting about you, I was I was watching a conversation that you were participating in. It was ADEC 2 years ago with
Okay.
Bunny,
Yes.
and you were covering some of these ideas. But one of the things I laughed out loud. It was the funniest thing when Bunny, during the intros, when Bunny said that she was looking at the images that were popping up, and she
Mhm.
was looking at some of your work and thought it might have been hers.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just, I thought that was great. But what I find interesting, especially in context of our conversation now, is there really is, especially in design and architecture, there is a fine line between dupe, inspired by, and coincidental creativity. There
Mhm.
really is. I mean, look, nothing's new. Chairs have four legs.
Right. Yep.
And it's very hard to come up with new concepts. Yet, one of the things that I think is so spectacular about your journey is all of the brand extensions and all of the avenues
Mhm.
that you're taking. And I'm wondering, what is your process by evaluating partnerships, evaluating extensions? Is it time for a new book? We're going to cover that too. Is it
Mhm.
time for a branded YouTube channel? We're going to cover that too. And all the partnerships. How do you evaluate with only 24 hours in the day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? You're not going to make more time.
Right.
How do you evaluate your partnerships and your extensions?
That's a great question. I think that it's important to never put all of your eggs in one basket, if you will, to really be able to be willing to diversify your interest and to extend your influence into other avenues. I think that's important. In launching the firm during the Great Recession, I learned very quickly how people are affected by the economy and Wall Street and their willingness and their confidence to spend on themselves and to flourish and to splurge on themselves is sometimes governed by how they feel about the market. So I learned early on to never put all of our ducks in the row or in the basket with residential clients. There's too much unpredictability, there's too much uncertainty with that as a foundational element to build solely from, in my personal professional opinion. So that's where the licensing and other avenues come into play because it keeps our firm its interest and its reach very diverse and extend it beyond the traditional client residential client model. And it's proven to be very lucrative for us to have various avenues to work within. Um, I think it's important to partner yourself with licensees who have a worldview that parallels or aligns with your own. Um, all of the companies that we've worked with, like Kravitt, for example, or Hancock and Moore and Maitland Smith, they are owned by families who are essentially dynasties, hardworking small businesses that grew from nothing and built something special from nothing. I can identify with that. I think they identify with me. Yes, we're all successful now, but we started off small and really working hard to go against the grain. So I look for that as a characteristic. Even with our new licensee that we just announced last week with Eichholz, when you look at their story and how they've grown, they are a Netherlands-based company, and they're looking to expand their reach beyond Europe. They want to come to the States. They've now, I think, opened 7 or 8 showrooms here in the States, but they have over 100, I think, 15 showrooms globally, right? And now they're targeting the US as a new frontier to expand their interests. Well, I'm the same way. It's like their way of knocking on 779 doors, one door for them being the United States market. I'm going to be a doorway for them as a licensor to introduce their brand as a design collaboration to the masses here. I can identify with that and appreciate that go get them busting down opportunities and making things happen. I really can appreciate that.
Put this in context for me because you know I speak with a lot of creatives at every level
Mhm.
of career. And it's interesting to me because I want your take on this. The more I speak to, the more it's really fascinating for me to hear many new designers feel like those who have reached a certain level of success no longer have to struggle,
Mm,
that they don't have to work as hard to get new clients, that they don't have to work as hard for new partnerships, that they don't have to work as hard to get press.
mm,
And I think that there may be some truth to that,
mhm,
but I'm curious if it feels that way for you, or, in times like we're in right now,
mhm,
if that kind of draws you back to '07, '08,
mhm.
and you have to kind of put on the blinders again and get back to the hustle.
Yeah, I mean, I've chosen to never leave the hustle. There's no getting back to it for me. I've stayed with it. And my team will tell you, we run this enterprise here as if we have nothing. Even though we've been very successful, I I operate from a place of adventure and a place of ambition rather than a place of abundance. Abundance can come from ambition. So you have to stay hungry and you have to stay humble. Those are the 2 H's that we live by here, 3 H's if you want to also include honesty. My team knows that even though we are flush with opportunities, we have great client projects, we have a lot going on, and yes, we're getting a lot of client calls even right now during this crazy, unpredictable time. We're still getting great calls for business, but it's because we never stopped hustling. And perhaps there are other designers who are different than me who they have other circumstances. Maybe they have generational wealth that's been passed down to them from very wealthy parents and family members, and this nest egg, this safety net that if their company does well one year, it doesn't, they're not really hurt financially. They can float along just fine. Maybe they have clients who are willing to pass them along to other clients, or their clients have so much going on that they're just this is a constant flow of work. Maybe their overhead is smaller, and so therefore the responsibility is just simply not as great. But I have a huge overhead here. I did not come from generational, wealth. I had to build everything I have from scratch. So I have never left the hustle game. If anything, it's like Notorious B.I.G. rapped in 1996, or whatever, it may have been 98. More money, more problems. So the more money you make, the bigger your clients are, the bigger the projects, the more prestige and television appearances. It exposes your brand to more eyes, but also brings more challenges, more responsibility. The more people you hire, higher salaries, cost of living, New York City, healthcare. If the president of the United States rattles the economy with the decision that he's made for whatever the reason might be, everyone's affected by in some way. And so if you've not insulated yourself and made your firm recession proof, then unless you have that hammock underneath you that you can just fall onto comfortably financially, you're gonna be in a bad place. So we always act as if the world's going to come to an end, even though it's not. We just work hard as if it were. It keeps my staff and I secure financially. I think it's very important.
I want to drill down on that a little bit because I think it's interesting talking about, you know, building a firm and developing a firm and growing a firm means hiring and bringing in others. And I'm wondering about your process.
Hmm.
Once you create an ethos, it becomes very challenging to defend that and move it forward when you rely on others who have to be flag bearers
Hmm.
for you. How do you hire? How do you evaluate? How do you drill down on those conversations to make sure? Because there's one thing, hire slowly, fire quickly. Isn't that
Yeah.
what they say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, how do you make sure that you don't, or how do you do the best you can to make sure that you don't have to fire anybody?
I think that the first step for me is really taking my time during the vetting process. We don't rush it. Sometimes we've done up to 4 or 5 interviews with one individual just to make sure they're really the right fit. Um, I ask a lot of questions, obviously as part of the interviewing process, but I want to see is the energy consistent from one interview to the next? Does the person get a bit more cocky and a bit more, overconfident as the interview goes on, or as multiple interviews go on? If the potential employee comes in naturally nervous and they're nervous the whole way through from every interview, that's giving me a snapshot into their soul that they're probably a very humble person and they don't think they've got this. A person that thinks they've got this from the beginning is probably not going to stay put very long, or they're going to get something else as far as a different position or even take your job one day. So I think it's important to really work with people who are humble, who have a good head on their shoulders. The design techniques and the talent, that's important. Don't get me wrong. The aesthetics and the skills, education, being proficient with different software, that's all very important to me. But the number one thing that I think I look at these days is character. The character has to be on point. You also can't have too many introverts or too many extroverts. You have to mix and match personality types. I've asked employees or candidates, what's your star sign? I don't want a whole team of Aries. I don't want a whole team of Libras. I don't want a whole team of Scorpios. Like there are energies that you have to kind of tap into, personality types. Are you a ENFP, a ENJ, whatever? Like I want to know all of that because you're producing a cast of people, like casting a movie, and the cast has to get along. There has to be leading actors and supporting actors, and they all have to understand and love the role that they're in versus coveting the role of other people. And in New York City, there are a lot of posers here, a lot of people who try to project themselves to be one thing and we find out later they are woefully underqualified or incompetent in the role. So I'd rather us take our time, really vet them out, do a thorough background check, call all the references. Um, and I even test them sometimes too, Josh. I had one potential employee. She didn't get this job, but she interviewed with me about another opportunity that she was, focusing on here. And she revealed something about her existing principal that should have been kept confidential from me as a competitor. And she brought this up from the angle of name dropping to kind of impress us with the interview that she had access to this, her boss's inner workings as far as a big project that she was working on. So I tested her and I said, well, what's the name of the project? Where is it located? And she dropped all the information. And I said to her, just so you know, that was a test. I wanted to see if your character understood the value of confidentiality because we're working on many big things here. And I had to make sure I have a team that I can trust around me at all times. And that's a test that unfortunately just now you did not pass. I should not know my competitors' inner workings of her business as you just displayed and shared with me. You actually just compromised your existing employer's confidentiality, right? So I think all that has to be taken into account when you're vetting out a new employee.
I love that. I do. It's interesting too to hear you talk about it. Do you think about, well, clearly you do. You think about your, not your necessarily your colleagues, but other designers in the space as competitors.
Mhm.
You are competing against them. Are you competing against them for the business? Are you competing against them creatively? Is it all of the above? How do you think about that?
I think about it from the angle of the belief that there's enough for everyone. I do believe that. But when it comes to competing for excellence in the industry, of course we want to be number one, right? What any small business that does not want to be number one in its category or its industry should not be in business. That's the whole point. We're living in a capitalist society, and we should be trying to capitalize on the momentum to make ourselves the best out there for our clients to consider for an opportunity. Um, I think there's a difference between considering another design firm as competition and considering them as a threat. We're not threatened by any other design firm. No one can do what I can do as a designer. I can't do what other designers do for their clients. A client's going to hire me for what they want for my aesthetic. That same client may hire a different designer for something else. So we don't feel threatened by them, but we are in a relay race, if you will. We are running for the prize. And the prize is to not only win and win the commission, but to be successful and endure beyond the finish line, to continue thriving and not just surviving. So I think that that's crucial to understand that it's not a given. And to your earlier question, you have to continuously keep working for the opportunity to keep hustling for it. You should never rest on your laurels and just think you've got it. That's what I mean by a competitor spirit.
Yeah, no, I love that. Being good is never enough.
Right. Yeah.
It's not. I was asked recently, this is not my first career either. I started off in broadcast, and I
Mhm.
was in the mid 90s, I was a music rep for an alternative station in Dallas.
Okay.
And I learned so much about the music industry. And I'm still surprised when I speak with some designers who don't think about this as a competitive industry. They think,
Mhm.
well, I do what I do. People come to me because they like what I do. They don't realize that they like what five other designers do too. And you may
Right.
have gotten the gig because you just charge less,
Right. Exactly.
or because you were willing to give them your trade
Designer
discount.
discount. Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
in the music industry, it was so interesting. Big bands don't start as big bands. Van Halen didn't start as Van Halen. You talked about Biggie. You know,
Mhm.
Biggie didn't start at the Apollo. He
Mhm.
started with handing out mixtapes.
Yes. Yeah.
And that there's a competitive nature. You can still love what other designers in this space do, but you still want to beat them for the business. You still want, look, I'll give you an example. um, Magazines today. Like, I will be the first to tell you, I love trade publications.
Mhm.
I do. At the same time, I'm very sad by the industry. And look, I go back to radio, same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Big media, it's the same thing. Because there's been this democratization of publication and publicity. You have a social media channel. If you have a social media channel, a website, and a YouTube channel, you're a publisher.
Right. Pretty much.
And the magazines have all scaled back on their contributors and their editors and their writers and their paging. And there's, the
And
ad
their
to edit,
quality.
the quality and the ad to edit ratio, which to me, it puts a greater responsibility on you because now you can't rely on them to come out and shoot your projects.
Hmm.
You have to shoot it. And
You
by
do it
shooting,
yourself. Yeah.
say, and by shooting it, you may get that spot because you gave them the art.
They don't have the budget sometimes to shoot it. And so you're right. You supply the assets and they just If, as long as it's editorially shot that fits their aesthetic, they just drop it right in. You know, it's a game. You mentioned like with music, one of my favorite girl groups of the 1990s was SWV, Sisters with Voices, and they came out at a time when there was a lot of girl groups and also a lot of boy bands on the charts at the time. You had TLC, you had SWV, you had In Vogue, you had just, all these girl groups, and they were all vying for the top of the charts. And when SWV came out, they had a lead singer named Coco, and she had a very unique voice, almost like a young child, kind of Michael Jackson-esque as well, and also a woman at the same time. Very unique. And when they came out, every record label was trying to put out their own version of SWV with another young girl, child, woman, Michael Jackson sounding vocalists. So then you had Escape come out, and then you had 702 come out, and then you had all these other girl groups that all kind of sounded like SWV. They were trying to copy her look and her sound. And so as a result, the Billboard charts became suddenly very crowded with lots of girl groups trying to copy either off of SWV, In Vogue, or TLC. I think those are the three girl groups that kind of set the standard for what the Destiny's Childs would become in the future, right? But it started with having something unique that set them apart from everyone else. And then there were the copycats that tried to create their own distaff version of that. So I think with interior design, it's the same thing. You have a unique look, a unique style. You're pioneering in a new frontier with a visual aesthetic. Then you have copycats that come through and copy and bite off of what you've done and try to make it their own. And then next thing you know, the industry, like those Billboard charts, is flooded with imitators that are trying to get the next version of what you just did. So it is a competition because if you look at a Billboard chart, there can only be one number one hit single on the Hot 100. Only one. You can be top 10, but if you want to go platinum number one, there's only one number one. So in that respects, I consider this a competitive business. It doesn't mean we're threatened by the other people who are on the chart, but we're going to work hard to get to number one. That's really important.
Love that. And it's interesting too, because back to Bunny for a second.
Mhm.
One of the things that I learned from Bunny when she was on the show, it's funny. When I started the show, I used to ask this question, like, so what's your design style? I came
Mhm.
from radio, so it's like if someone's into Van Halen, then I can name the other nine bands that they love in their top 10,
Mhm.
right? So I kind of felt like it was the same thing, and I had to learn, and it was through that conversation in particular where I kind of realized it's not a style because you design for your client.
Right.
What your client wants, you're creative enough and talented enough. If it's modern, if it's traditional, if it's transitional, if it's whatever.
Mhm.
But there's a through line. I call it a fingerprint.
Right.
And to me, the fingerprint back to music is like if someone's gonna play guitar like Eddie Van Halen,
Mhm.
There's only one. You can be incredibly talented, but you're not gonna be Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
You can try to play like him. You can have a guitar that looks similar to it. There's a lot of things that you can do, but you talk about the posers or those who kind of try to be that. What do you think is are some of your through lines that are represented in your work, and not that it's matchy matchy or the same,
Mhm.
but some of the philosophy, the musical notes. What are some of these fingerprints? What are some of these through lines that you think are representative that show up in your work?
I would say an unapologetic embrace of color, texture, pattern play, um, an eclectic, exuberant approach when it comes to really loving a wide range of design styles, a wide range of furniture styles. We always aim to create what I call the fresh continental mix of elegance and modernity. And what I mean by that is a space that is classic as far as the way how it's articulated, but modern in the way how it's presented. So if you have an incredible neoclassical interior with great architectural bones, and maybe you have an egg and dark crown molding and raised paneling on the walls, a very, French or American colonial revival type design aesthetic as far as the structure. I love the juxtaposition of that with a Kagan sofa or a Saarinen table under a very deco chandelier, right? I love the tension point between these very disparate design styles being thrown together into a blender and making something beautiful out of it. Any of those design styles separated from each other, like an all modern room or an all deco room or an all traditional classic room, would be a design that would speak to an era. And you would be able to say, okay, I did that project in the 1980s or the late, 19th century or whatever the case might be. When you mix all the styles together, it almost becomes timeless. The timestamp is removed. You don't know what year we did that. So we aim to create something that will will make people jealous. We like to create interiors that incite jealousy. So beautiful, so maximalist, so sexy, so incredible, so wonderful, so joyful that it makes people envy. And when I say envy, from the angle of, I want that for myself. I want to live like that too. And I think we all deserve to, whatever we can achieve, we should all surround ourselves with beautiful, joyful environments.
Was that aspirational intent sort of the motivation behind Design Reimagined?
For the book,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Design Reimagine is very different than Design Remix because Design Remix was more of a theme-driven coffee table book. And it was a really nice mix of projects, but a lot of them were more Midwestern based as far as logistics. And the clientele that we have there is just a different clientele than what we have in the Northeast or in the South or outside the States. Not better or worse, just different, right? Design Reimagined, though, I think is much more unapologetic when it comes to the color and the texture and the pattern. The projects there are much bolder, much more eclectically exuberant, and just very joyful. Even just the front cover, it's color, it's happy, and I think it speaks to the clientele that's featured in the book. They are all really lovely, down to earth, joyful people. And our staff is that way as well. So I think the results just kind of speak for themselves.
Does attaining success provide you permission to take more chances, to take more risks?
Uh, yes and no. In theory, it should, because you've proven it in your portfolio. You can show a client, whether it be a residential client or a big hotel project, you can show them what you've done and how it was successfully, articulated with the project. And now you've a proof of concept, right? Um, but it's still at the end of the day, the client's project is still their home. And if they are more laid back, more conservative, more, in the safe zone, which is totally fine, you're not going to be able to go as far with that particular client as you would with another client. That's why we don't try to push a look like a CDJ look on any clients. We don't have necessarily a look. We have a vibe, I would say. We have an approach, but our projects are very diverse, and Design Reimagined will really show that. I think more than Design Remix, it's a real wide range of aesthetics in this next book, from super modern and clean and gray and beige and taupe to maximalist and every color in the rainbow. It's a really nice spread. And I think it represents how bold or conservative the clients were that were involved.
How do your books and the YouTube channel and
Mhm.
your Instagram and all of your media work into the brand ethos? Um, what is the level of consistency that you try to keep across all platforms, or is this an opportunity for you to explore and experiment?
We try not to experiment in public. We try to come with a cohesive packaging. In fact, the meeting I was in before I joined the podcast with you this morning, Josh, we were having a meeting with our social media coordinators and our graphic designer, Lindsay, who is fantastic. And coordinating their efforts. Some are working on Design Reimagine the book as far as the rollout with our PR team. Some are working on Design Reimagine the series on the YouTube channel. And so the channel series and the book have the same title, but we're using different fonts because the font that we use for the front cover of the book is great for the front cover of the book. But after doing some testing, we found that it was not resonating as well as a font on the packaging for the banner on the YouTube channel or on this show. So we're now doing a different round of new fonts and design aesthetics with the animated intros for each episode, for example. That's a bit more flashy and more eye-catching because that medium requires that. So there has to be some flexibility with how you're rolling out your design aesthetic as a company, as a brand, and yet at the same time, it has to still be cohesive and it has to coalesce in a way that feels seamless.
I asked the question because, and it's been a while since I've talked about this, but you know, clearly we've talked about music. We both love music.
Yeah.
Um, I am a huge jazz fan
Hmm.
and huge Miles Davis fan.
Hmm.
And when Davis came out with Bitches Brew,
Hmm.
it shook me. It was uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And I know why he did it, but it was so completely divergent from what he had built as his, if you will, a style guide
Right.
for an improvisational form of music. You could, it
Mhm.
almost feels to me, and I'm not suggesting that Bitches Brew or your version of it is the next thing that's coming, because clearly we've established that that's not something you do in public.
Right.
But I think it's interesting because that you mentioned how you test and
Hmm.
how you evaluate. I find that different, very different from many, if not most, that I've spoken with. What is the internal process that
Hmm.
you use to test, evaluate, retest, A/B test, and determine we're going to try new things?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a trust, if you will, a brand trust that we bring things to. And they are a mix and medley of professionals from different backgrounds. Some are in the in fashion world, and some are in the entertainment world. Some are producers like Goodbye Pictures, who's producing our Design Reimagine series, our PR team, friends and family, other designers, people who oversee PR and marketing for other brands, like my friend Derek Jack. And we show them the trailers for the new series. We show them the front covers of the new book. Yes, the talented team at Rizzoli knows what they're doing, but they are going to often defer to me as the author because they do want me to be happy about what we're producing together so I can get out there on the road and do these book signings and feel good about what I'm showing the audience. So it's very collaborative. And so we will bring these different, assets to people and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think? Is this working? Is this not working? And we get that feedback. And then we take that back to the powers that be and we discuss it and lay things out. And then sometimes we have to make a pivot. And that's okay. I think it's important for people to be humble enough to realize that we don't know everything, that great decisions are made when you have a multitude of counselors, not too many cooks in the kitchen, but cooks who are in the kitchen who know how to cook. And as long as you have that team aligned together on one mission, it's amazing what can be produced from those partnerships.
So it sounds to me like for you, this really is, not to just kind of pound this whole music reference into the ground, but it sounds like it is a band. It,
Mhm.
it, it is a group of complementary creatives and participants.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
if you had a drum circle, you'd get one feel, but you're going to miss out on so much more.
yeah, yeah. And I think that sometimes my team will, they, even though they know that I don't have an ego to bruise and I really do value their feedback, I think that sometimes people assume that because I'm the head and the principal of the whole franchise, that somehow, or I should say enterprise, not franchise, the whole enterprise of our business, that somehow I'm going to just either not accept what they're thinking or I'm just going to make my own final decision. And I really enjoy the volley of opinions. Now, there does come a point when it is pencils down, we have to move forward. But I enjoy getting various opinions and feedback because I often find myself looking at things differently and saying, you know what, you're right. I hadn't considered that angle before. Maybe we should pivot this way. And and I'm fine with that. So I think you have to your earlier question about how do you hire, you have to surround yourself with people who are equal parts humble to let you take the lead and equal parts confident and ambitious enough to speak up when they think you're about to make a mistake. And a lot of times people surround themselves with people who are too extreme of one and not enough of the other. And they end up making disastrous business decisions. So we try to avoid that here.
That's admirable. I think you should always try to avoid that. It's interesting too, though, something that you said. I'm curious about your ability to accept criticism.
Mhm.
Do you think that's kind of a leftover? Is that who you are and who you've been since youth, or is that kind of a leftover from knocking on 773 doors?
Um, it's definitely a childhood tenet of
It is.
my personality. Yeah. I mean, the Greek root word for humility is humus, Humus, with a little accent mark, I think, over it. And when you translate that to English, it means dirt or dirt-like. So we were always raised to keep our heads to the ground, to stay humble. And the good thing about being grounded in your approach to life is that should you stumble and fall, you don't have too far to land on the ground. When you elevate yourself to stratospheric heights with arrogance and haughtiness and an overconfident, position, when gravity sucks you down, and it does when you make a mistake, the splat is so much nastier and so much messier. So I think it's important to really be humble. um, yes, to your question, 779 doors definitely humbled me even further because I really thought that I was going to retire from my previous job and just work 30, 40 years and be done. And the universe had a different plan for me. It takes a lot to go out there and knock on strangers' doors, to humble yourself, to accept rudeness. There are people out there, Josh, who are bottled up, you know, refrigerators of hate and anger and frustration. And if you come on their doorstep, you're now eligible for a complete unleashing of all of their toxic behavior. And I got a lot of that in that situation, in that door knocking, grassroots campaign. That was hard. But it built, I think, in me some character to continue remaining humble so that when the great client came at door 779, they were so lovely and so wonderful. The reward came in, the ship came into the pier, and it was perfect. I had earned at that point the blessing because the universe had taught me a lesson. Never get too complacent, never think you've got it all figured out. We will shake you up, but if you remain humble, you will land on both feet without as much of a splat.
How miserable would you be if you were that 40 years of pension and a watch guy?
I was very unhappy even with that job.
Yeah, I
I'll
imagine.
admit that. Yeah, I mean, I was designing like executive offices and lobbies and signage, but I was also ordering office supplies and, fertilizer for the lawn. It was a whole range of design-esque purchasing responsibilities, but nothing that was nearly as creative as what I'm doing now. I was phoning it in, especially those last 2 years, I was kind of phoning it in. It was like becoming like by rote, like a monotonous routine, like a hamster on a wheel. I was in that corporate hamster wheel moment. Um, I was also really unhealthy. I was 237 pounds at one point. I'm down to 165 now. Yeah. Um, but uh, but at the time, I was just eating badly because I was depressed and unhappy, unfulfilled. I was not working out in the gym. Um, so I may have been making a lot of money, but I wasn't making a lot of healthy decisions in my life. So definitely being shaken out of that momentum, I think has helped me spiritually, emotionally, and also physically.
Do you think part of that has to do with the fact that what you do now is making better the lives of those who live in the spaces that you create?
Yeah, I'm like a design doctor. I had to prescribe medication visually to make people feel better about themselves and their environments. And I would never prescribe anything for my clients I would not prescribe for myself. So when you come to my office or my homes, they all look at the same level as my clients because I want them to know that I really do stand behind this testimony as it pertains to living a great, beautiful life. Whatever your budget might be, to the extent that's possible, surround yourself with things that are beautiful. Um, but it's also you're taking on a lot of different hats, Josh. You are a designer, obviously, but you're also a therapist. You are a financial advisor. You are a friend to the client. You become all these different things to them because you become a confidant. You get exposure and access to very private matters in their lives, and you become an ally for them in their lifestyle. It's a wonderful privilege to be able to have that. Those connections, and they are long lasting even beyond the conclusion of the project.
You mentioned ICOLS and the partnership
Mhm.
with them. Will you walk me through the process of the creation, of the creativity of, because it's one of those things, every designer at some point wants a line, wants a magazine article, wants a TV show on HGTV or some other outlet that they can express themselves in a fourth dimension, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
with this particular partnership, it's one of those things too where it's forever. You create a product and the product is attached to your name. It's forever. What was the process like?
Well, we have been customers of iCoast for quite some time. We love their lighting. We use it in our client projects all the time. They make beautiful things. And I think that that's part of the process is their relationship. A licensee is not going to brand with a licensor. There's not some sort of sales history. Like how can you really be an advocate or a champion for a brand that you yourself have never purchased from? I think it's very difficult to do that. So I think that was part of it. We had been partners with them when there was no financial gain or benefit to us aside from putting their beautiful product in our clients' homes. So they saw that alliance and that partnership in our brand before they approached us about doing the licensing agreement. I have been sketching light fixtures and designs for lamps and chandeliers and sconces. I had 98 families of light fixtures I have been drawing since 2017. And when I say families, Josh, each family has portables, a table lamp, a floor lamp, a sconce or two different derivatives of that, a chandelier or two or three different configurations and sizes of that, flush mounts, and semi-flush mounts. I had drawn 98 families of all of those fixtures. So you have hundreds of designs, right? All drawn by hand, sketched and influenced by a wide variety of ancient and more modern influences. And so when they approached me about this collection, I was like, well, actually, I actually have something to show you right now if you want to take a look at it. And I showed them, I think we showed them 60 slides of concepts. And I didn't let them take anything home. You never give your potential licensee your actual sketches without a signed contract. For those of you who are listening, never do that. You want the contract first because that shows a commitment on their end. Because let's be honest, all a designer company has to do is tweak your design 10% to be able to legally say it's mine. So you don't want to give any competitor your creative IP until you have an actual legal commitment and contract in place. So we showed them everything virtually on a Zoom call, and they loved it. And they're like, we love to move forward. Let's talk about a partnership. They submitted the contract to us. We negotiated everything out. They were so lovely. We got married on the legal contract. And then I gave them the 60 slides of designs. And then they went through, Josh, and curated the designs that they felt were the best reflection of where ICOS wants to go with some modifications. Some were translated exactly as they were on the sketch. Then others they translated to bring the price point to a place where it could be affordable or where freight and shipping, especially all these tariff situations now, would be amenable to the design. And we have, I think, 35 SKU numbers for the first launch in January, which is a pretty robust offering considering that's the first wave of a, I think we have a 7-year deal. So we have some time with them.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And yeah, 35 SKUs. That's healthy. That's really cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Um, how you brought up tariffs, and I'm glad that you did.
Hmm.
It's funny because a lot of people will think, well, the wealthy clients who are doing design don't really pay attention to cost. So adding 145% from China or, 20% from another country or 40% from another country, it's no big deal to them. I would
Hmm.
argue that it's a big deal to everybody.
Hmm.
Most people, because they'll have a financial if they're a big enough client, they have a financial person who's handling it, and it's not their house.
Hmm.
It's their job. How are you navigating these completely uncertain times? It's got to be like roller skating on marbles. I mean,
Yes.
how do you how do you navigate this? There are some that say, well, we're going to start front loading all of our purchasing decisions, and that was great, but now that's over. You can't do that anymore. Well, we're going to start respecifying to countries that have lower tariffs. Well, what if they don't have the product you want? There are so many different options, but not everything works for anybody, and certainly it doesn't work for everybody, but you
Hmm.
have to keep trying.
Hmm.
How, what's your thought on this? What's the practice? What's the approach?
The approach for us as a firm has been focused on being calm and considered with how we approach this with our clients. What has been done, and I'm not going to get into politics as far as, deep political spectrum. I don't think you have to be a Democrat or Republican or independent to look at this objectively and say that the way how it has been rolled out has been erratic. I think everyone can look at that, no matter what I think that the end result, the goal makes sense. We do want more American-made manufacturing. We do want to have more opportunity in this country. Absolutely. Full stop. 100% approval of that. That may take 10 years to get us there as far as to build the infrastructure for that end game. In the meantime, you cannot take a machete and just chop down what works and what also doesn't work. You have to have a plan. And the tariffs, enacting them, rolling them back, enacting them, backing away, that just rattles people's confidence and it makes them jittery. So what we've tried to do is be calm, to be a source of calm for our clients because they are looking at their financial portfolios. And let's be frank, when things are going crazy with the Wall Street and the stocks, yes, a person may be very wealthy, but if you're losing, $50,000 a day in your portfolio because of the uncertainty, that $50,000 is going to come out of perhaps a project or a furniture budget or something else. So it does impact even the wealthiest among us. They may not say so, but it may simply be them saying, you know what, we're going to just pause for a minute. Well, for small businesses, a pause for a minute could be a year or two. To them, a minute is not a big deal, but to a small business, it is. So I think it's important that we as small business owners are calm and collected, that we are proactive in how we approach the conversation with our clients, that we are transparent. You should be transparent in all your business dealings, no matter what it might be. But with this, say, this is how we're going to handle it. We're going to absorb this percentage of this increase. And then after that, we'll have to pass on the cost to you. Also, this furniture order we're about to place, there are some components coming from China. Since we have a 90-day stay on this situation, you might want to place that order right now because 90 days from now, we may be in a different world. And you'll be surprised, Josh, how quickly clients appreciate the the transparency and how quickly they send in those checks to pay for that furniture because they don't want to get hit with a 125% increase. So it's about being proactive and transparent and helping them realize that we're not just your interior designer, we're also acting as a creative fiduciary. And we're looking out for your best interest here. Yes, it's our best interest too as a small business for our revenue, but we also want you to be happy and we want to finish the job. And we know they do too. So just be calm in a time of crazy.
Speaking of which, one of the most difficult things to do for anybody, I think it's a universal,
Mhm.
is to be creative when you're stressed, taxed, and burned out.
Right.
How do you recharge? What do you do to maintain that spark? To what do you do to mentally recharge the batteries?
Sleep. Um, which I don't get a ton of sleep these days. You know, we work hard, we party hard. I sometimes put in between 60 and 70 hours a week sometimes here, Josh, but when I go on vacation, I go on vacation. I usually leave the country, go abroad, and for 2 or 3 weeks, don't call me unless the client's house is burning down to the ground. And even then, call 911 first before you call me in France. But I think vacations being strategically scheduled throughout the year is very important. I can be pedal to the metal if I know that there's a vacation coming into orbit. You to look forward to. I think it's important that as creatives and as business owners that we're always looking at the end of the tunnel and realizing that the light at the end of the tunnel is a break and not a train. So scheduling out time for yourself is crucial. Um, Going to the library, museums, movies at the theater, stage plays. Um, I love going to the flower district and just walking around looking at beautiful flowers for inspiration and just for peace of mind. Um, I love reading comic books and escaping into the worlds of fantasy, whether it be Marvel or DC. I'm a huge Marvel MCU head. Comic books mean a lot to me. Books of fantasy like L. Frank Baum with the Wizard of Oz series, books that I read as a child. Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. Um, I don't know, Isaac Asimov, Hans Christian Andersen. These are timeless works of literature that are, in my opinion, literary art. I like revisiting those things and transporting myself back to a time when, in my childhood, life was a lot more simple. And it's amazing how just rereading passages that you read as a child somehow transports you back to that moment. And as long as that book is open, Josh, you are in 1982 or 1993 or 1979. And then when you close the book, you're transported back to 2025. I think that's really a really good way to escape and to recharge.
I love that. And I love this. Corey, I cannot thank you enough. This was so much fun. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun and just thank you for continuing to shed a light on so many important topics that are so meaningful to creatives and those who love the creative adventure that we're all on.
This wraps another episode of the Convo by Design Icon Registry presented by Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a celebration and recognition of true masters in the art of design, architecture, and the industry that we all love so much. In the pursuit of making better the lives of those they serve and giving back along the way. Thank you, Corey. Absolutely incredible story. And I'm honored, privileged, and I love being able to share this again. Thanks for listening to Convo by Design. Thank you to my partner sponsors, Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, for presenting the Convo by Design Icon Registry, and Convo by Design participating sponsors, TimberTech, Shelter Republic, and of course, Pacific Sales. And thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. I couldn't do this without you. Really wouldn't want to. And I hope that this show, this podcast, this journey of ours helps you stay motivated, inspired, and focused so you can rise above the chaos.